Hello everyone. With the onset of global economic slowdown in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, the recipe for economic revival is getting weirder and weirder. We are seeing a plethora of weird economic ideas. And so in today's presentation, we shall be discussing some of these weird economic ideas like should the taxes be raised, should the temple gold be confiscated to fight the economic slowdown in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. We shall analyze these ideas through the modern economic prism in this presentation. So let's get going. So again, with the current economic slowdown, loony economic ideas, particularly from the left, have been abound. The sum and substance of these ideas has been their mistaken notion around resource mobilization. Of particular interest to these people are three aspects or tools to do this. First, to appropriate wealth of the temples, setting in the form of gold or cash. A wealth tax. And finally, a high income tax. Of course, there are some loonies who have gone to the extent of suggesting appropriation of private property. Well, this might be maybe to fulfill their long-standing or old communist Stalinist dreams. Who knows? So, to understand how naive and stupid are these suggestions, I would give a brief overview of the modern monetary setup that we are living in right now. Also, I would discuss about the real role of taxes in the economy. And no, they're not a source of revenue for the central government or the federal government, unlike most people think. Now, since the onset of the very concept of money, the world has largely been following some kind of a commodity-based monetary system. And most popular among them was the gold standard of money. Now, till about 1970s, early 1970, all currencies were linked to the US dollar, and the dollar in itself was linked to gold. So this was kind of a semi-commodity based system, and it was called a Bretton Woods system. However, in 1971, this system collapsed. Now, what were the advantages and disadvantages of the system? The advantages were that it used to keep a leash on the unfettered government spending. Also, since ultimately the money was linked to the amount of gold, the malinvestments in the economy used to quickly correct themselves. The disadvantages were that the economy never realized its true potential. So again, since the banks could not extend infinite credit, as the money had to be counted for to the amount of gold available, the credit needed by the industry sometimes was not available, and hence the true growth never got realized. Also, everyone, including the government, had to make a choice between spending on item A or B. So spending on health services or building a road. Now, things have changed. However, people recommending these ideas, their understanding of economics has probably stopped at this point. And if that is the case, these ideas probably deserve a place in the archives of an economic museum. Today, we are in the era of credit and fiat-based monetary system. Now, how does this works? How does credit-based money works? Now, let's say a person goes to the bank to get some loan, get some credit. The bank extends the loan to the person in lieu of some collateral, and that's it. Voila! Credit is created and money is created in the economy. Why? Because, as the name suggests, money is credit in this system, and credit is money. So remember, in this system, money is ultimately be created by the bank out of simply thin air. It's a fiat money. Deposits in the system are not needed really to create the loan. They are being created out of thin air. They are only needed to balance the books. And instead, it's the opposite. It's really the deposits are being formed because the credit is being created by the banks, not vice versa. For more details, check out the money presentation, and the link will be provided in the description. So, we have discussed briefly, we have touched upon briefly on this, that in this system, government has monopoly over the money supply. It can simply print the money. How can it do that? Well, the government can run a fiscal deficit, which is the excess of expenditure over the revenue the government receives, and can issue debt. This debt can in turn be bought by the central banks, or in case of US, the Federal Reserve. And how the Fed will do that? Well, it will print money, and using that money, it will buy that debt, and that freshly printed money would go into the federal government's account, and that's it. Money has been indirectly printed by the US government. This process in modern day is also being called as QE, or quantitative easing. Now, in this system, the government, of course, has the monopoly to collect taxes in the economy. However, unlike what many of you might think, the role of taxes for the government and in the economy broadly is not as a tool of revenue collection. What instead the real role of taxes is essentially a tool to control demand and hence inflation in the economy. Let's explore this in a little more detail. So what is the role of money for government, and how is it different for us from us in the system? Unlike us, for government, money has no store of value in the system. Why do I say that? Well, think about it. If you have something that is theoretically infinite and potentially you can have it at any time, would that thing would have any value for you? Of course not. So for the government, money has no store of value, but it does have a measurement value. Like for us, it measures its wealth, taxes, etc. using money. It's like a scale, like we measure distance in kilometers and miles. Money also for the government has a medium of exchange value, wherein it can buy goods and services using money. So now let's come back and discuss the real role of taxes in the economy. As we have seen that government has a monopoly over money. So money is not a store of value for government, unlike for us. So taxes, as we have discussed briefly before, are not a tool of revenue collection for the government. So the question comes, what exactly is the role of taxes? Why does the government has to collect taxes in the economy? So why taxes? First point, it maintains the authority of the government over money supply. So here is what it means. The government has a monopoly over money in the economy. And to maintain that, the government spends money in the economy. The money that is created literally out of thin air. Now, why would the people collect that money that has been printed out of thin air in the economy? Well, the people do collect that because they have to pay taxes to the government. The government takes taxes, and that is a source of monopoly of government over the money supply because it has to collect these taxes. Second point, the taxes controls the demand and hence inflation, which is very important for the current monetary setup according to modern monetary theory to succeed? Here's how. Let's say the demand for products is rising in the economy. Now, the supply of products is actually pretty low in the economy, however. This gives rise to inflation. Hence, the government comes in and raises the taxes. This leads to lowering of money supply in the economy and thus reduction in demand, which leads to reduction in inflation of the economy. For the negative sides of inflation, you can check the detailed presentation on inflation. The link would again be given in the description. Third point, removing taxes completely would be politically imprudent. Here's how. Let's say the government reduces the taxes to zero. Of course, the people would be elated, happy. Now, inflation starts to shoot up in the economy, and the government has to raise taxes to control it. Now, that would make the people furious. And then what about the votes for the government? It will be a tough decision to make, and invariably the government will mess it up. Fourth point, it's a tool for wealth transfer. So, due to taxes, the government takes money from person A and gives it to person B for its welfare programs. So, it's a tool for wealth transfer in the economy. And finally, taxes can control production charges in the economy. So here is how it works. Let's say there's a factory producing goods A in the economy. The government in its wisdom feels that these goods should be produced less in the economy, and so it raises taxes on these goods in the economy. The price rises, the demand for these goods A reduces, and the production also comes down in the economy. Similarly, let's say there is a factory producing goods B in the economy. Again, the government in its wisdom feels that these goods should be produced more in the economy, and so the government reduces the taxes on these goods B. This means the price reduces, demand rises, and hence the production of goods B rise in the economy. Thus, using taxes, the government can control the production matrix in the economy. So, under the current modern monetary setup, the role essentially of money for the government is it's a tool to allocate resources in the economy, transfer wealth, and control the levers of demand and supply in the economy. So, what is the situation as of today? Now, due to the pandemic, there is a demand shock and at the same time a supply shock in the economy. However, the aggregate demand shock is far outweighing the aggregate supply shock. Now, as the lockdown is easing, supply shock is lessening in the economy. However, the demand shock is likely to continue. Now, this is because of the nature of pandemic, which raises health uncertainty among the people and uncertainty about their future, thus making them spend less, especially on discretionary items. And the second point of job losses in the economy. Hence, when we know now that in this credit-based and fiat monetary setup, where money is literally created out of thin air, why would someone give a lunatic suggestion of raising taxes in the wake of a severe demand shock and idle supply sitting in the economy? This can only happen if someone is crazy, has zilch understanding of modern monetary setup, or wants the nation to plunge into a deep depression. And so similarly, what good would appropriating the temple gold do or cash do? Again, since money in today's fiat-based world is not an issue at all for the central or federal government, what good it will do? Sure, if the country is close to a balance of payment crisis or has very low forex reserves, such gold assets are useful to access the forex capital. However, are we in such a kind of situation? Absolutely not. So again, anyone suggesting either lacks economic understanding or acting with a very malified intent. So let's summarize this. In the era of credit and fiat-based money, money in itself is no longer a limiting factor. And specifically, during the periods of demand shock and ideal supply of what we are witnessing today, unless a nation has a low level of forex reserves, taxation and appropriating gold is a non-starter of an idea. What actually is required is fiscal spending to boost demand in the short term and hence growth in the short term, and policy changes to boost supply for the longer term. And in a demand shock environment that we are witnessing today, running a high fiscal deficit with debt monetization or essentially printing money is not inflationary. In fact, this mechanism may prevent the economy from diving into a deflationary spiral, which can cause literally a severe depression in the economy of a nation. Of course, fiscal deficit boost has to be calibrated in such a way that the increased demand is catered by the domestic supply and not through imports. For example, an indirect tax cut or a GST cut, in other words, for a short period of time given to sectors which have a high domestic production can achieve this. This is just an example. Because if this is not done, then what we will see is that largely the growth because of the domestic fiscal measures will happen in the foreign country from where we import the goods and not actually in your own country. So thank you very much for watching this presentation. Hopefully you like the content. Do subscribe if you enjoy such content and comment in case of any queries. Thanks a lot.